Okay, everyone, thank you very much for being here today.
The Liberals finally confirmed what everyone already suspected. They will campaign against the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Well, surprise. Under Peter Dutton, the Liberals have been running a soft no campaign since the election, so the announcement of the official no wasn't exactly unexpected. Now, not supporting the voice is one thing. There are plenty of people on the left of politics who have issues with the voice or who don't support it because they don't believe it goes far enough, and they want to see treaty and truth-telling progressed ahead of it. Not all Indigenous people support a voice to Parliament or indeed the process. There are going to be plenty of views. This isn't about that though. Everyone is going to make up their own mind about the voice. This video is about some of the muddying of the waters the Liberal Party have created while announcing their own no, and some of the political play scattered throughout the announcement. So let's take a look at what was said on what Susan Ley called a day of yeses, which was yes to a lot of things not being asked, and a no to the one question you will be asked to answer.
We want to make sure that we can get the best possible outcomes for Indigenous Australians, and we do that through recognising Indigenous Australians in the Constitution and by providing for their say, their voice to be heard by government in a very clear way, but at a local level. Having a Canberra voice is not going to resolve the issues on the ground in Indigenous communities.
First of all, it's not a Canberra voice. Not all Indigenous leaders are on board, but calling it a Canberra voice is deliberately disingenuous, given the voice came from the Uluru Statement from the heart. That statement, delivered 5 years ago, came after a 4-day convention of the First Nations National Constitutional Convention and followed consultation with more than 1,200 people. In the 5 years since, working groups made up of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and legal experts have worked up proposals of what the voice might look like. This isn't something the Labor Party came up with. Being spoken about in Canberra doesn't make it a Canberra voice. But it's a good line, and an old one. It's what people against the Republican constitutional change ran. They call that Republican model a Canberra model, or a politician's model of what a republic would look like. That referendum went down. That's why we're seeing it being used again. Simple words, not exactly the right meaning.
It's also important that we will continue to engage with the government in relation to legislation and the committee process that's underway at the moment. But the Prime Minister has so far changed the wording to be put to the Australian people on 3 occasions, the latest version against the advice of the Solicitor General and the Attorney General, and it's clear that he's not going to change the wording of that proposal.
Well, there's a process underway right now about whether the wording does need to be changed, and the Coalition is part of it. The opposition is going through with the somewhat now farcical process of taking part in a parliamentary committee reviewing the piece of legislation for the referendum, which outlines a proposal it will be actively campaigning against no matter what that committee recommends. The parliamentary committee is consulting on the question you will be asked and whether there are any ways to improve it before it's legislated as part of the referendum process. Anthony Albanese has said it may change again depending on the outcome of that consultation and the recommendations of the committee. The question isn't the question until it's legislated. Peter Dutton has also continued to claim that the question released in March goes against the advice of the Solicitor General and the Attorney General, but there's no evidence that's the case. In fact, Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney General, has repeatedly said it's not correct. Governments get legal advice on proposals and alternatives as a matter of course. The Solicitor General, the government's lawyer, then offers advice from all sides. There's nothing to suggest Dutton's claim is correct, and he himself has said he's relying on media reports, not first-hand knowledge.
Today is not a no from the Liberal Party, it's a day of many yeses. Yes to constitutional recognition of Indigenous Australians, yes to local and regional voices, yes to better outcomes for Indigenous Australians, yes to Australians having their say, even if the Prime Minister is determined to continue his my way or the highway approach.
Now, this was a favourite. It's a nice nod to Orwell, but the Liberal Party's day of many yeses is just a no. The Uluru Statement from the Heart asked for a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament, so it could not be scrapped by future governments, like previous bodies set up to advise on Indigenous issues have been. Remember ATSIC? Constitutional recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders would be symbolic, but not actually do anything. It's also not what you're being asked. Legislated local and regional voices have already been rejected by Indigenous consultation processes over the last decade, but groups like that already exist, including under the former coalition government. Indigenous leaders say those local and regional voices need a national voice to coordinate efforts. Think of it as feeding input up the chain. But again, that's not the question being asked. The voice will be chosen by First Nations people from remote, regional and urban communities with a mix of experience and genders. It's not designed to just be a city voice. What the coalition is proposing is essentially its own party platform, which it never got around to acting on during its almost 10 years in government. The coalition was in power for the last decade. Many of the policies it is now criticising as not doing anything to close the gap were of its own design. There are going to be lots more questions about the voice, and not everyone is going to agree. But some of the arguments the coalition are using to oppose it are purely political or just disingenuous. Argue your case, but just keep it based in fact.